Hey, what's up? It's February, so happy Black History Month. And I wanted to talk about some books by some Black scholars and activists that have really inspired me lately. But instead of giving you just a general reading list, I wanted to specifically talk about some Black authors that have inspired me over the last year while I've been working on my own book. I had to read a whole lot, really stressful year, but some of these books I think you will all enjoy as well. Hopefully you check out all of them and find value in all of them, just like I did. But I know how hard it is. You all have humongous reading lists and a bunch of unread books on your bookshelf, so at least check out one of these. First, the classic The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, which is very important if you want to get into anti-colonial studies. This is sometimes like the first book that people suggest with that because he's a philosopher, but he's also a psychiatrist who also talks about the psychological effects of colonialism. And in my own work, I've thought a lot about Christian colonialism and of course, when we talk about decolonization today, the type of colonialism we talk about being freed from is by the hand of Christian colonizers. And if we want to have a conversation about decolonization and decolonizing Christianity in general, then we need to look at anti-colonial studies. Just the first chapter, called On Violence, will blow your mind, I promise you. And also on the subject of Christianity and colonization, we have this classic book, The Christian Imagination, Theology and the Origins of Race by Willie James Jennings. Jennings is a professor of theology and Black church studies at Duke Divinity School. And I read a lot of books about how Christianity was used as the legitimizing ideology for colonization and Christianity's role within the origin of race and white supremacy. But this book was definitely the most compelling, partly because of his gift as a writer. He's really good at storytelling, but also it's not just talking about the history. There's also a lot of theology in this book. So if you want to begin to explore this topic of Christianity's role in the origins of race and white supremacy, then check this book out. I think you'll really like it. And of course, we got God of the Oppressed by James H. Cone. Dr. James Cone, of course, is the classic guy to go to when we have a conversation about Black liberation theology. A lot of people really like his book, The Cross and the Lynching Tree, and I've suggested that book multiple times on this channel as well. But another important part of my work is talking about colonized Christians and how they've reshaped and reinterpreted the Christian faith. And that faith of colonized Christians is faith in a very different kind of God than the God of those who have historically oppressed them. It's a faith in the God of the oppressed, a God who always chooses the side of the oppressed and empowers that struggle for liberation. And I use a lot of that language in my own work, and I owe a lot of that to James Cone. And then we got Abolition, Democracy, Beyond Empire, Prisons, and Torture by Angela Davis. This is a very little book. I mean, little book, but short too. It's a few different interviews with Angela Davis about abolition and democracy. And we're talking abolition of the prison industrial complex, which I also talk a lot about in my book. And I wouldn't be able to without the work of people like Angela Davis. And abolition democracy, by the way, that phrase comes from W.E.B. Du Bois in talking about the work of Reconstruction and how plans for reconstruction of Black societies after the abolition of chattel slavery was cut short. And he talked about how we needed to build new democratic institutions in order to reconstruct society. Instead of doing that, we just built more institutions to further oppress Black people and other marginalized people, like the prison industrial complex. Also on that topic, We Do This Till We Free Us, Abolitionist Organizing and Transforming Justice by Mariame Kaba, which is a bunch of articles that she had written all put together in this book. Also really helped me in thinking about abolitionist organizing. Also, the website criticalresistance.org has a bunch of awesome free resources on that topic. And I also wanted to mention this academic book series from Palgrave Macmillan called Black Religion / Womanist Thought / Social Justice, which has a lot of amazing books. If you just look at the titles in there, it'll already blow your mind that this stuff is being written. And I'm like slowly making my way through those books, but a couple books from that series were really helpful for me. I don't have the physical copies of these. I got the cheaper digital versions, but I'm sure a lot of you know how to get the cheaper digital versions when it's too expensive. But we got this book, A Theological Account of Nat Turner, Christianity, Violence, and Theology by Carl Lampley. This book was amazing. If you want to learn more about Nat Turner, this is the book. Also, if you're interested in a deeper exploration of the topic of Christianity and violence and nonviolence, this is also a really good book. And lastly, this book, Indigenous Black Theology, Toward an African-Centered Theology of the African American Religious Experience by Jawanza Eric Clark. This book is a really good critique of Christology within Black liberation theologies that have tended to still perpetuate the demonization of indigenous religions. Part of the work of colonization was demonizing indigenous spirituality and making people believe that their souls were saved from that demonic religion that they used to be a part of, and now they're saved through Jesus. And there's a lot of liberation theologians, Black liberation theologians, and Latin American liberation theologians that haven't done the work of challenging that idea within Christology and soteriology, the theology of salvation. So this book is like a really necessary progression in that part of the discussion of liberative theologies. And I believe Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are interested in talking about decolonizing their faith need to also talk about reintegrating some of what was stolen from us, the cultural resources from Indigenous cultures and spirituality that was demonized, and talk about reintegrating it in a way that honors the legacy of our ancestors instead of completely splitting us away from that as we embrace just a purely European Christian idea of spirituality. I think it's important for us to reconnect with the cultural resources that were stolen from us. And so this book is about African American Christians reconnecting with African indigenous religion, but I also found it really helpful in rethinking about my own experience as a Latino Christian and talking about indigenous American religion. I have a chapter in my book called Taking and Reshaping Jesus, which is all about colonized Christians reshaping the Christian faith to empower us. And there's a part in there about reintegrating the insights of indigenous spirituality. And that part of the book is really, really important to me. But also the title of that chapter is inspired by this clip that I want to end this video with. In 1971, there was an episode of this show called Soul where Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin had a conversation about civil rights and fighting racism and their two generations of fighting the same fight. And I really love this part of their exchange, and it really gets at what I'm trying to explain to you all. And so before we end this video with that clip, let me just say, I would not be where I am theologically, philosophically, politically, without the influence of great Black scholars and activists. Let me know in the comments some of the Black voices that have inspired you and your journey, and maybe even some books that you think we should all check out. So yeah, thank you for watching this video, and I'd love to keep this conversation going.
Let's say somebody like you, you've been out of the church for a long time, okay? I grew up, of course, in a Baptist church, and I really dig the church.
I do too.
I think it's a very cool...
I do too.
I can't dig the theology, but the music and the energies of the church.
Yes.
But then I went to the New York Community Choir had its anniversary recently, its first anniversary, and I went up to an AME Zion church, as a matter of fact, and the lady was singing, some lady was singing, "Yes, Jesus Loves Me," and people started shouting. You know what I mean? Yes, Jesus.
Yeah.
People were shouting, and it hit me as I was sitting there. My God, as a so-called Black militant, I have nothing stronger to offer than Jesus.
Yeah, but you see, but you, baby.
And that was a mind. It blew. As a matter of fact, you have a church and said, "Ain't that a bitch?" As I was testifying, "Ain't that?" It blew my mind.
Baby, what we did with Jesus was not supposed to happen. At all.
Believe that,
no.
yeah.
We took that cat over and made him ours. There's nothing whatever to do with that white Jesus in Montgomery, Alabama, in that white church. We did something else with him. We made him ours.